I'm just going to play into it a little bit. Mama said, don't go near that river. Don't be hanging around old Catfish John. But come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. Catfish John was a river hobo, driven down by the water's edge. I'm so glad I got to know him. Well, I'm proud to call him my friend. Mama said, don't go near that river. Don't be hanging around old Catfish John. Come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. Born a slave in the town of Vicksburg, traded for a chestnut mare. Although he never spoke in anger, yeah, Lord, was hard to bear. Don't be hanging around old Catfish John. Come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. So I took you back to another morning, to a day long ago, to the sweet magnolia blossom, where the cotton fields were white as snow. Mama said, don't go near that river. Don't be hanging around old Catfish John. But come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. Mama said, don't go near that river. Don't be hanging around old Catfish John. Come the morning, Catfish John. Good morning, everyone. I'm Walter Parks, coming to you from St. Louis. 6 hours ago or 7 hours ago, I said, we can't do a show because I forgot that my van was still loaded with lumber and memorabilia that I took from my dad's house after he passed away. One of the things I did on my last trip down to Florida. And so my mixer, my sound mixer that we use to broadcast is at the bottom of that heap of memorabilia and lumber and everything, and old kettles and furniture and that kind of thing. And I thought, let's just bail on tomorrow. And then I woke up this morning and I said, no, I'm here, I'm able. Margot, can we throw some sound and lights together? And she's done it. We're kind of we pieced it together with some of our old equipment. So I hope it sounds okay. But the most important thing, I think, is that we're together, even if there's 20 of us. I also learn from people that they watch it later. So thank you for being with me on Sunday morning. This is either the first day of spring or the eve of the first day of spring. I'm not really sure. And that was, speaking of spring, might as well celebrate something new for me. That was from my brand new record that I have here. It was waiting for me when I came back from the road. And it is called the Swampalachian Trail. It's Walter Parks and Rob Curto. Rob Curto is my accordion playing colleague, and it's an EP. We sell it for $10, and that means it's $2 a song, and I think that's quite reasonable this day and age. That was a song called Catfish John. I found that trying to chase down an old banjo song from the Okefenokee, and the banjo song is called Catfish. I just came upon Catfish John. There was many bluegrass groups playing that, and I liked it, and I did an instrumental version, and I kept it in my repertoire. When I play all of this bluegrass sounding music on electric, then it kind of becomes my swamp cabbage stuff, and I've been playing acoustic in it for about the last 2 or 3 months, and kind of wanting to get back into the electric thing. I'm going to be doing a project with Guy Davis and Bruce Smolsky called Gumbo Grits and Gravy, and we're doing some shows in Europe in August, and I'll be mostly using electric on that, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. Rob Curto and I are going to do a tour in May, and right now the dates that are booked are in the Northeast, but if you want us to come to your town, we can make that happen. I think we might even be playing on a flatbed truck in Iowa around the 4th of July. I'm not sure about that, but that's my dream. So, let me tell you, the year is not over, and it's still time to get your pinup calendar. And this is my version of a pinup calendar. I would rather than look at bathing beauties and so on. These are bathing beauties enough for me, and I urge you, ladies, you will even like this. Who wouldn't want a calendar of vintage guitars? No, but in all seriousness, if you love vintage guitars the way I do, and I've loved them since I was a kid, this is a great calendar. Still time to enjoy a lot of the images, and if you care to reminisce, you can go back to January. Let me show you what January looks like. These are called blackguards, and that's an Esquire and a Telecaster or a Nocaster or something. And each month is brought to you by a different vintage guitar emporium or salesperson. You can find this. Look at this blackguard. Now, for those of you who don't have a innate interest in vintage guitars, look at that. I mean, this is, perhaps with this calendar, you will begin to appreciate vintage guitars in a different way, because the photos are fantastic, and it helps you get through the year a lot better, because this is marking every day of the month. Anyway, you can find this catalog from guitarlogs.com. They don't know that I'm pitching it. Nobody knows I pitch anything. If I'm pitching pancakes, if I'm pitching eggs in a checkerboard box, nobody knows it. So I can't be bought in that sense. Don't send me any products. I will find you. But this month, March, it looks to be like there's two 1954 Strats, and that's probably a 54 Tele. Isn't that beautiful? I just love all the road miles that you can see played into these things, and I think that's kind of what I'm about these days. It's just trying to put in the road miles. I love touring, and I haven't been doing proper tours in a sense of like going out for a month and playing a lot of dates. We're trying to crowd up the schedule for May, so you can help us with that. Rob and I will do house concerts. We'll do small venues under certain conditions, and of course we're always open to doing festivals, and they can be community festivals and it can be big festivals. I just learned that there's a great new blues and jazz festival down near my neck of the woods where I came from, called I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. A lot of you know that. And there's a Fort Mose Jazz and Blues Heritage Festival. Fort Mose I grew up in Northeast Florida, and all that while I never knew about the phenomenon that was Fort Mose, M-O-S-E. Fort Mose was a place where originally it was a place where black folk went if they managed to. It was a settlement that was essentially allowed to exist in a certain way. I mean, it was protected, really, from what I understand, initially by the Spanish. So if a slave managed to escape the rice plantations from southeast Georgia or possibly, higher up, they could make their way into Florida and find refuge, and a lot of them went to Fort Mose, just north of St. Augustine. And they would swear allegiance to the Spanish crown and convert to Catholicism and all that stuff. So there's a new Jazz and Blues Heritage Festival, and I think it's perfect for my spirituals group, the Unlawful Assembly. So I'm going to see if we can't introduce ourselves to those folks. But it was a very exciting whirlwind trip for me down in Florida. I went to the Okefenokee Swamp and interviewed Mr. Bill Chesser, who was the last living male Hollerer, singer, who was archived in the Library of Congress in 1944. Bill's now 90 years old, and this is the second time that he sat with me with some degree of difficulty for him. He was having just challenges, just kind of staying with the interview, but he really, really wanted to do it, and it's evident by the stories that he told and the excitement that he told them, with which he told them. And I'll get all that edited at some point. But Margot might have a picture of Mr. Bill. This is a picture of myself and Mr. Bill, if you've got that. Is that up on the screen yet, Margot? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Bill's 90 years old, and at one point, throughout the interview, throughout my time with him, I couldn't tell if he was just barely getting through it sometimes, or if he was just really enjoying it, and maybe a little of both. Every now and then, on a certain subject, and I gave him about 16 questions, he'd go, and that's all I got to say on that. And then we'd have to go on to another subject. But at one point I was talking to his wife, and then Mr. Bill just appeared with his, he proudly appeared with his certificate. And he just stood there with the certificate and held it for me. And I said, I have to snap this picture. And I did. And it's just an example of, even though he left the swamp and the ways of living out there, the surviving and the bare to the bone living, he's proud that formed him. He's proud that those survival skills made him what he was. And he went on to be a Standard Oil executive and so on, and lived his life way out of the swamp, but returned. So I interviewed him in Folkston, Georgia. And my trip to Folkston led to so many other things that I'll tell you about in a second, some important things. But that picture of Mr. Bill holding that plaque is just, it was the best moment, because it really showed me that he was so proud to have been a part of the Chesser family. The Chesser family had been out there homesteading since 1850. And they were not white folks of a plantation mentality. They had no slaves. They were poor folks living off the land, and right on the edge of the swamp, actually. But it was a slightly rainy day when I interviewed him, and I told him I was worried about getting mud from my boots on his carpet. And he said, and he just went into a little story. He goes, you know, that old house that we used to live in out on the island. It was a log house, actually, and it's still standing. He says, Walter, you can see there's about in some places a half an inch between boards, so I can see straight down to the white floor, the white Southeast Georgia sand underneath that. And he said, a lot of people don't think of Southeast Georgia as being cold, but in the wintertime it gets really cold out in the swamp. He said, I was freezing on those nights in the winter, and I never want to sleep or live on hardwood floors again in my life. He said, I'm just happy to take my chance with the carpet, and if it needs to get dirty from time to time, that's fine. But I will not sleep on hardwood floors. And in the modern world, everybody's telling him hardwood floors are so exotic and wonderful. And it's just an example of how what we sort of immortalize as, how we mythologize as the great old way of living, to the people who actually went through it, they're happy to be out of it, in one sense, and they're proud of it, but they don't necessarily look back. And so I'll tell you more about that in a bit. I'm going to change guitars. This is my old. If you're tuned. My regular listeners know what this is. This is an old Richie Havens' old guitar from 1967. Even though Richie played it in a D tuning, I'm going to I don't put it in D tuning too much. Yeah, smack my guitars around. That's one of the reasons I like vintage guitars, is I can bang them up and not feel guilty about it. This is one. I'm going to stretch my legs out here. Even though I do yoga, it's still, I don't sit like that too often, so. want. Call him up and tell him what you want. You don't need no number, tell him what you want. You don't need no number to tell him what you want. Jesus don't be lying, tell him what you want. Call him up and tell him what you want. Bubbling back down Park Avenue, you're gonna be hard to take. Eat that skinny, come to Papa. Sunset Boulevard, you're gonna be traffic stopper. That's a song called Dipstick Rag that I combined with a Ry Cooder song called Jesus on the Main Line. Dipstick Rag was one that I originally recorded with Swamp Cabbage on our first record. It's called Honk. Everything with Swamp Cabbage is electric. It's like electric bluegrass or electric folk music, really. It's some people call it Southern rock, but Southern rock, I think of Southern rock as kind of that... has those sort of rebel flag waving anthems and so on, and I love that music, Sweet Home Alabama and that sort of thing. But really, Swamp Cabbage is kind of it's a folk band, really, but it's electric folk. So we never would get embraced by the folk community because we were too electric and I think, we were relentless, we just there was nothing there so much for there weren't too much subtleties in it. I'm speaking in the past tense, but the group is still very much, well, not very much alive, but we still play from time to time, and I've got some new music that I'd love to record with them. When I get 10 songs, we'll call the guys up again and do another record. But it just it does bring up a subject that I've been thinking about a lot. And one of the things I try to do on Hymns and Hollers show is just kind of share with you guys what I'm going through as an artist, and because I know that a lot of us are sort of roughly in the same career arc bracket, if not the same age bracket, and I'm getting to the point where some of my long involved songs. I'll give you an example. There's a song that I've still yet to properly record that I love doing called In Lieu of Flowers. It's almost a symphonic sort of song. I mean symphonic in that it's like classical music. It's my friend, my cellist friend, Jody Redditch says it is a through composed piece, and these things take months to write. Though when the dust settles, it'll be a 3 minute song, but I'm kind of down for 3 months, and I don't mean down like depressed. I'm down in that I can't do much else. If I'm gonna write a song that takes 3 months to write, it just occupies my whole existence, and everything else in my life just kind of falls to crap. I mean, if something needs to be repaired around the house, it waits for 3 months, And I don't necessarily say that to anybody, but it's the only way I can get through these pieces. I have to stay on them, and they have to stay in my mind. And most annoyingly to me, and probably everybody around me, is I'm distracted. When I'm writing like that, I'm so preoccupied. I've got this song. It could be, I mean, just, I can't do it like that. But just the introduction. That little bit probably was, I don't know, resulted in Margot saying to me, Walter, you didn't hear what I said? That kind of thing. I mean, that's not that it goes on all the time, but I'm trying to make a point that if I'm really doing due diligence to the project that I'm working on, my mind is on it constantly. And it's so hard for me to shift from business mindset or administrative mindset to artistic mindset, and but the older I get, I'm figuring more ways to do that. So this is all to say, I'm getting to the point in my career to where I'm sort of, it's not really a decision. I've evolved to the point to where I'm saying I don't want to write these long pieces anymore. I don't want to go into this sort of creative abyss. It's not necessarily that fun. What I find that's more fun is playing these songs that I wrote, in some cases almost 20 years ago, and really playing them well to the point, playing them as good as they possibly can be played, to the point to where I'm beginning to realize, oh, okay, this is what this song really is about. This is really how this song needs to be played in order to make it connect with people. So I'm finding that I'm letting myself. I was going to say denying, but that's not what it is. It's evolution, really. I've evolved to the point creatively that I'm saying it's more important for me to really give these songs their due life. And if I had just kept leaning on that crutch of I gotta have new material, some of these songs would have never been fully realized in that sense. And I'm considering taking on a project of redoing and re-recording some of my old material from the group that I had during the early 90s called the Nudes. And the project is going to be called Renewed. And it's just going to be me, probably just me and the guitar, kind of taking a new look at some of these songs. There's songs that I'm really, really proud of. And I certainly have enough to make a record. I don't think I'll do it on cello, maybe with other musicians if I add some, but maybe will. But so my thing right now is I'm recognizing that at a certain point in my career and a certain point in my life, I had this passion, and I'm sharing this. I'm sort of venting because I think probably some of you all are going through a similar sort of part of your career arc or your life arc. And I'm just allowing myself to say, okay, maybe I don't have that passion anymore for continuously putting out new work. There's something about it that I just, it's not that I don't believe in new work. I will deal with it if a song or a little morsel comes to me and says, you have to give birth to me, then I will. But I'm really enjoying taking some of my older songs like Dipstick Rag and combining them with Raikuta or whatever, giving them a new life. And every time I play Dipstick Rag, it's difficult to play on the acoustic, but every time I play it, I get better at it. And the song lives in a different way. For instance, on that song, it was a project of mine during the COVID because, we couldn't really interact with other musicians. I added bass lines to it, so it became more complicated, and it was tricky all of a sudden in a different way. You hear that bounce, bounce. That's not the way I originally played that on Swamp Cabbage because I had a bass player. I was going, I can't even do it. It was all the melodies or the harmonies, but there was no bass in there. And so I've kind of worked out this arrangement, and it's, oh my gosh. The interesting thing about it is I wrote that song inspired by Scott Joplin. Ironically, where I now live is Scott Joplin's hometown, where he grew up in St. Louis. And so I wanted it to have that kind of a ragtime. It was slower. I can't even do it. There we go. Does that can y'all hear the Scott Joplin in that to the extent that I can play this slow? Thurston's going to tell me something about Scott Joplin. That's a good boy. Oh, we love our Thurston. Thurston is struggling with cancer. He's had it now for, well, probably longer than we've known about it. But we got him an operation about 9 months ago, and he's doing so good. But and probably many people would have put him down, but we had that demon exorcised from him, and he was wearing the cone of shame, and he was all shaved up, and he's doing really good. I don't know if y'all could see that tail wagging, but we're glad we put a little money to keep him going, and he made our lives better, and he's still happy. His tail's just wagging. What are the things in our life that we have no knowledge of, and we just keep going? And that's kind of like Thurston is. We know he's got. You just never know. You just never know. I mean, there's a fella down the street here in St. Louis, and he had an old dog that was just littered with cancer, and he was so concerned about that old dog. And I could just tell that the prospect of that dog finally passing away and having been such an inextricable part of his life was just going to ruin him. And lo and behold, that man ends up not surviving his dog, and it was just so sad. So you just never know. And so with that in mind, that's a good topic for Sunday service, I think. Just live your life as if just live it to the fullest. And one way to live your life to the fullest is to get a vintage guitar calendar. I'm so looking forward to April, because this is what I get to see all the whole month of April. 2 Stratocasters. I don't know what years they are. Let me look at them. Oh, these are 54s, they look like, or maybe a 55, but they're in such good condition I almost don't want to look at them. I don't like old guitars that are in such great condition, but I'm sure they're proud of them. Oh, look at May coming up. You hardly ever see a Sunburst Telecaster from the 50s. And let's see, what else? Oh, June. This is what we call a Mary Kay finish. And I don't know why they call it a Mary Kay finish. It probably has to do with if you sold enough cosmetics in 1956, you would get, or 58 or so, you would get a Mary Kay Stratocaster. It's see-through. That maybe the see-through aspect, that it has kind of just a subtle cosmetic sheen to it. So it's painted, but you can see the grain through it. Why do they call these finishes Mary Kay finishes on these guitars? These are only made in the late 50s. So I'm so much looking forward to June, because I get to see this Fender Strat with a Mary Kay finish, which I'd love to have someday. But, you know, in the Bible, let's talk about the Bible for a second. It says in First Thessalonians or something like that, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's vintage guitar. So just be happy with the vintage guitars that you have and play them to the fullest. And so let me change tuning. I'm in the mood to play an Allman Brothers song this morning. And so let me see how quickly I can do this. I love trying to do this in my mind, figure out where I am intonation-wise, tuning-wise, and then figure out how to get where I'm going. Okay, I got to go from a G. It keeps the mind alert, you know. There we go. I'm there already. All right. So I know I'm not ready for the recycling bin quite yet. But I am gonna supplement with a tuner just to get me an exact tune. Part of the reason I want to play an Allman Brothers song is that when I started writing out, I wanted to, I don't know if I have an old book next to me, I don't think I do, but when I started writing out in music notation some of the old Hollers, especially Bill Chesser's Holler, when I wrote them out and then played them on guitar, now he's doing this stuff like, yeah. And because I'm not in standard tuning anymore, well, let me pick up the other guitar, I'll show you. He'll be doing this sort of thing that translates to this on the guitar, like, yeah, yeah. It's kind of a yodel, yeah. That kind of a thing. And when I wrote it out first, the way I approached this Library of Congress project is I would write the music out and play it on guitar and then try to translate it again my way back to voice. But in that second step of playing it on guitar, I'm like, this all sounds like Duane Allman's guitar. Of course, it's Georgia music. But my point is that these country motifs, you know, these southern rock motifs, It all came from the human voice, pretty much. And I can just imagine guys in Scotland and Ireland back in the, way back in the day before they had these natural beauties, these natural wonders, bathing beauties. Before they had such bathing beauties, they were only their way of transferring music was voice to voice. So by the time it got down to the U.S. and people were singing, and they picked up violins, and which they started renaming them fiddles and so on, and then they played banjos. And then, but before this all made country music, it was all performed on the voice, and I just think that's so fascinating. But anyway, here's a song that was I play it kind of a lot, but I don't play it acoustic much. And this is the song that kind of changed my opinion of the acoustic guitar. It's on Eat a Peach. Performed okay. It was. I want to bring something to mind there. I just want to share with you all. I remember being in Birmingham, Alabama, years back, and I was talking with. We were doing a festival. I think they had a festival there called City Stages at one point, and my group, the Nudes, was going on before or after Arlo Guthrie, and that there was no hierarchy of all of that. I mean, they just juxtapose bands according to some kind of whim. And it didn't mean that if we played after Arlo that they thought we were more important or whatever. It's just the way it was. So I was talking with Arlo. I said, sometimes I just kind of lose my center when I play a show, and I just can't get myself back to that place, and I just keep kind of pushing. That's the only word that I could use. I try to push to connect and push to get across, and I was doing that a little bit in this version of Little Martha. I'm gonna play what I mean, and then I'm gonna pull back, and I'm just going to I'm going to get myself out of that mindset of, I just got to connect. I just got to push. I got to make this, I'm just a guitar, and I got to really make this big. So I'm going to go from that to just pulling back and being what I am. So hold on. So it doesn't always involve intensity, but often at times that's the way it manifests. And so what happens with acoustic instruments is that if you push too much, everything starts clicking and clacking, and you lose your tone. It's especially true on the banjo. You get your power by pulling back, and and the challenge that I have when I'm playing acoustic concerts is because there's so many musicians who come into on acoustic and play on acoustic stages, and they're strummers, Well, I'm going down to Georgia, that kind of a thing. I don't play that way. I play with my fingers. Everything I do musically on the guitar is actually very delicate. So I'm always trying to get these guys who run the sound systems to turn me up so that I can play powerfully but not have to push, because I lose all my tone. The reason I'm saying this is because I think this mentality transfers to whatever we do. It doesn't matter if we're an accountant or a banker, or getting back to the realm of the arts, a photographer, a dancer, or whatever. You gotta do what you have to do within your capabilities, and you'll win. And I'm realizing that more and more in my life. I have so many projects that I'm doing, and I have the tendency to say, yes, I want to be involved. Yes, I can envision this. My imagination is my friend, and my imagination is also a very sort of fickle foe in a sense. I have to be very careful, because I can imagine myself being successful at anything. That same imagination propels me and creates my music. So if I'm not careful, I let my imagination run amok, and I've got so many things on my plate that I do nothing well. And rather than, for instance, with this show, rather than trying to do this every Sunday, I'm just trying to check in with y'all, and when I can, rather than just pushing through it, like I did with the acoustic guitar. So sometimes, like next week, I'm going to be on the road in New York doing studio work, and also playing with Guy Davis and Bruce Smolsky in upstate New York, rehearsing. Sometimes I just can't put a show together, and I'm allowing myself to say it's okay, because when I finally do, it'll be better than if I just threw it together. So I'm gonna say that I'm not gonna be with you every Sunday, but just check in with me. Have your cup of coffee. I'm not gonna sip at this because Thurston was shaking his fur next to it. But by the way, check it out. Ella J Coffee House, Northeast Georgia. It was just there. But have your cup of coffee. Turn the YouTube or the computer on at 9 if you're in the 10 if you're in the East Coast. No, yeah, it's 10 o'clock if you're in the East Coast. 9 o'clock if you're 9 a.m. Sunday morning if you're in the Central, and see if I'm there. That's the best we can do. Let me see if I've got some other things to cover. Oh, this is really, really important. You know, in my travels to the Okefenokee Swamp, I was invited to come to the Okefenokee Swamp Park. Now, I've always related in my travels, in my studies and research of the Okefenokee Swamp in southeast Georgia, which is a 650 square mile nature preserve, essentially. It's a refuge, wildlife refuge, national wildlife refuge. Dedicated so in like 1944 or something. So anyway, in my travels down there, I always related to and always visited the National Wildlife Refuge, the entrance of which is down by Folkestone, Georgia. There's also something called the Okefenokee Swamp Park. And when people say, oh yeah, I've seen movies that were made out in the Okefenokee, if I talk about the Okefenokee, all of that was made up in the Okefenokee Swamp Park. At the very north end, it's actually not on the refuge, but it's basically the same terrain. It's just north. It's just right on the line. And so all those movies that were made in the 30s and 40s, they were made out in the Okefenokee Swamp Park. And at that time in American history, the swamp was mythologized, and it was almost buffooned in a sense. There was people were putting their mouths in gators for photo ops and wrestling bears and all that stuff. And I thought, oh boy, if I go out there, I hope I don't see all that nonsense, because I just can't tolerate it. And that's not at all what swamp life is or was. But they're not doing that stuff anymore. That's long gone. There's still a railroad that I think is questionable, only in that I like the concept of a railroad out there, because a railroad was a part of the Okefenokee story. They laid railroad track out there to remove the logs in the early 1900s. So to that extent, I think the railroad symbology is important. But the cool thing is that you can get on this little railroad and sort of drive through the swamp and access it in a way that feels safer to a lot of people than maybe getting down in it. Now, I took a little walk in the swamp with waders and everything, and that was interesting. It was quite meaningful, but most importantly, they need some help out there at the swamp park to renovate some of their fixtures and so on. I mean, they've been, a lot of the stuff has been in place since the 60s, late 50s. There's an observation tower that's higher than anything out there. It's just I couldn't go to the top of it because it's not safe anymore. There's an amphitheater that I just would dream to bring my band down to. And it's got a swamp water feature in front of it. It's just fantastic. But it's not safe to be under that. So they really need to renovate the place, and they want to, so that people who don't want to do the hardcore stuff, camping overnight on one of the islands, rolling your dice as to whether or not a bobcat or a cougar is going to come up to, a panther is going to come up to your tent in the middle of the night. If that's not for you, you can go to the Okefenokee Swamp Park and kind of enjoy that reality in a little safer way. Safer in the sense of you're not going to be exposing yourself to the dangers that could happen out there. And if you're not prepared for those dangers, best that you just go to the Okefenokee Swamp Park and enjoy it that way, because it is certainly beautiful and it is realigning. It's it kind of, the swamp just sort of grabs you and says, "Hey, there's so much to pay attention to here." You and they will all help you with all the things you can pay attention to. But let's bring it back to the city. In Folkston, Georgia, is an old school that we toured, and this school is right next to an auditorium that I played in. In fact, the auditorium that I played in was a part of the old school. The auditorium was long since renovated, but the body of the school, the classrooms, the halls, the restrooms, is in disrepair. The roofs have been compromised. It's leaking, and so the Okefenokee Swamp Park is spearheading an initiative to save that old school in Folkston, Georgia. And this is the metaphor old school really applies here. Slate chalkboards, the just wonderful porcelain walls in the restrooms. The halls have this wood crafting, wainscoting and so on, wonderful plastering that may or may not be saved. But maybe Margot can show you an image, I don't know if she is, of one of the classrooms and the sense and the condition of disrepair. The Okefenokee Swamp Park is trying to raise money to save that school so that they can create a Okefenokee Heritage Museum, so that the works and the music of the swampers that I'm researching, so that the ways of life and can be told and shared. Because the wildlife refuge, there's a gift center and a little museum, but the Okefenokee Swamp affected a whole area. It affected the commerce of a whole area, and it still can affect the commerce. And they're hoping that there would be a tremendous amount of jobs that will be created to renovate this old school. So the first step is in saving the place from the wrecking ball. A new friend of mine, Kim Bednark, is the director of the Okefenokee Swamp Park and the Okefenokee Experience Project. She has, just 2 days ago, she got a sense of, I hate to use this word, but it's the way it is, stay of execution, so to speak, for that school. They're going to give her 6 months to raise the money. And I think the first step is just getting enough money on the table to where they can say, okay, we can think about renovating this and saving it. Why do they want to tear it down instead of renovate it? They want to tear it down simply because it's a liability. And I said, well, somebody come up with the money to pay the insurance bill and relieve them of the pressure of what could happen, God forbid. Somebody just comes up with a premium. I don't know if it works that way with governments, but that's the way I think. It's just like if they're worried about the liability, somebody else pay the premium so that if something happens, so at least it buys them time. So if y'all want to donate to it, please reach out to the Okefenokee Swamp, Okefenokee Experience Project, and I think Margot has the window up on the screen. And I would sure appreciate y'all getting involved. And we're going to do concerts to help raise money and raise awareness. We're really reaching out to folks in Savannah, Georgia, all the retirees in St. Simon's Island and Jekyll Island, and the folks down in Jacksonville, Florida. The Okefenokee Swamp Park, and that's the site you need to go to. It is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit, and they can funnel your funds to where it needs to be. There's one more thing I want to tell you about, and I'm just going to say goodbye because I have something we have to prepare for here at the house. St. Patrick's Day a couple of days ago, I was wearing green and around green. I had a green t-shirt on at least. But more poignantly for that day, I was in this field, a wonderful field in northwest Georgia, along the Etowah River. And we had gone to Cartersville, Georgia, to visit some relatives, my mother and I, when we were traveling through. And I saw a sign that said Etowah Mounds. And I'm always interested in Native American mounds and so on. So we go to these mounds, and it's huge. There's three mounds, the largest of which, a Native American mound, was along the Etowah River. This thing is about 65, 66 feet high. It looks like a big arena out in the middle of a field or something. It's a Native American mound. It's flat on the top. So back in the day, it turns out these Etowah mounds were originally built in the Mississippian era. You know, the Native Americans were, the Mississippian era was not one tribe. It was more like a way of living and a culture. And I got to, so the Mississippian era is, that construction is very similar to the Cahokia Mounds here near St. Louis. The Cahokia Mounds are even higher than the Etowah Mounds. But they're similar, very similar in construction and design and layout. Thousands of people lived here. And what wiped them out, the best that we can tell right now is before white folk came from Northern Europe and did all the Jamestown settling and all of that, DeSoto was over in that neck of the woods. You know, he was a Spanish explorer, conquistador, and so on. I think in the 14 or 1500s. So he started chipping away at the Mississippian culture way before the white folk came over from northern Europe, and way before all that Virginia settlement. But he was coming up from the south, probably looking for gold. And interestingly enough, it's in the northeast Georgia mountains, very close to where he was. As a matter of fact, the Etowah River sources are very close to Dahlonega, where, if you know Georgia, that's where they used to mine gold. Very, very interesting. Now the Etowah River, I traced it. I looked on the map last night. Never knew this, but the Etowah River. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I think I'm right about this. It winds down, starts up there in the Appalachian Mountains, winds all the way down, connects with what's known as the Alabama River, which goes through Selma and works its way all the way down near Montgomery or through Montgomery first, and then Selma, and then keeps going south, dumps into Mobile Bay, where the waters from the Tombigbee River are also dumping. So, you know, the Tombigbee River, if you walked all the way up that, as folks used to do when they were runaway slaves, they would walk a whole year to reach the Tennessee River and then across the Ohio River. So you go that way up the Tombigbee, it'll eventually connect you with Paducah, Kentucky, and the Etowah River, and the Alabama River takes you to essentially Dahlonega, Georgia, from Mobile Bay. Fascinating stuff. And so I'm wondering, were these folks walking across land to find each other and to share ways of doing things, or did they do this by waterways? Did they make their way to Mobile Bay and back up the Mississippi, where they would be right next to Cahokia? Who knows? It's not for me to determine, and I've done way too much talking. Listen, I won't be with you next week. I hope you've enjoyed this show. I haven't done much playing, but that's okay. I'm down here. We just kind of threw this broadcast together. I will play a hymn for you to close it off. And this is one that Mahalia Jackson did in the 60s. It's a beautiful song, and it's called Precious Lord. Take my hand, lead me on, let me stay. I am tired, I am weak, Lord, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, take my hand to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on. When my way grows dim, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, to the river I will stay. Guide my feet, take my hand, oh, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on. Walter Parks, this is Hymns and Hollers. Thank you for tuning in. I might see you next week, might not. Just depends on how easy it will be. Just tune in. Check with me every Sunday morning, and tell folks about it. I've got some new music out in the Unlawful Assembly. I've got this new record with Rob Curto called the Swampalachian Trail. I'm proud of it. I guess that's it for today. It's Hymns and Hollers. Thank y'all very much.